No, you don't have to be. All right, everyone. Welcome back to the U.S. Regional Championship. My name is Corey Baumeister. That's our 2016 World Champion, Brian Braun-Duin. BBD, how you doing? And are you excited for this top four action?
Absolutely excited. Yeah, I'm doing great. We just got to watch some great Magic, and we're about to watch one of the most important matches, if not the most important match in this tournament, which is who is going to make it to the finals and qualify for the next World Championship.
Yeah, and maybe cement themselves in the history books, which you did, a couple years ago, 8 years ago.
Hey, whoa, calm down there. Calm down.
All right, so let's take a look, and BBD, walk us through the bracket and let us know what happened with the matches that we didn't necessarily see on camera.
Yeah, so we watched Kyle Moran win against London Glenn, and then we also watched Chang win over Doucette. But in the other matches, we had Boros Convoke beating 5-color Legends. So we'll see Chris Barone move on. And then we also saw that Gruul aggro deck, which we've featured a couple times on camera, ended up beating Azorius Control and will also make its way into the semifinals.
Yeah, really, really sweet. So we're going to be bringing you coverage here of both of these matches because, well, they are incredibly, incredibly important. So we're going to be starting the match with Boros Convoke versus Azorius Control. And we're going to start with Chris' deck here, who we saw a little bit. Any big changes from this list from the other Boros Convoke decks? This is a list that we have seen multiple times. 3 in the top 8 BBD and 2 made it to the top 4.
Yeah, I think one of the bigger differences in this list compared to some of the others we've seen is that there's no Sanguine Evangelists, but there's 4 copies of both Case of the Gateway Express and War Leader's Call. So Chris's list is a lot more reliant on these enchantments to provide extra power to the creatures, which has pros and cons.
Okay, absolutely. And then on the other side, it's Kyle Moran. We just saw Kyle win that really sweet match up against Boros Convoke. So Kyle already won this matchup, eliminating the only other Boros Convoke deck. Is Kyle going to be the Boros Convoke killer all the way to the World Championship, BBD?
There's a good chance of that. I mean, we will see what happens. Notably that Kyle was the 8th seed, will be on the draw. Okay. Which is very important. And I think it's really going to come down in game 1 largely to those 2 copies of Temporary Lockdown, which are very powerful in this matchup. Sunfall, while very good, can sometimes be too slow if Azorius Control lacks enough other early interaction to keep Boros off its game plan.
Totally agree. All right, everyone, let's settle in. This could be a long one, as Azorius Control always plays these extremely long games, but going to be an incredible match. Reminder, everyone, winner of this match is going to the World Championship. And BBD, just while these players get going, can you speak to what it's like to, truly be at the World Championship? Of course you won it. That's another step, but just making it to the tournament, it's something I aspired to my entire professional career. What's it like?
Yeah, it's really awesome, and especially making it. I think if it's your first time playing in an event of that caliber, it's good to have the opinion of like not worrying too much about how well you do, just doing your best. Yeah. But notably, Chris in this game, I just want to point out, Chris kept a 1-lander, and it was basic Mountain.
Wow.
So I think it looks like did not draw another land. So yeah, this is a tough spot.
And both players did mulligan, mulliganed and kept a 6. So, if you keep a Voldaren Epicure as your 1 red drop, at least you can discard it, but goes for the Gleeful Demolition instead. And look at that top deck, BBD.
Yeah, that looks like a Battlefield Forge, which is probably the best draw you could have in this scenario.
Yeah. All right, so coming on in for 4 damage here to Kyle. And looking at Kyle's side, we see a No More Lies. There is a Field of Ruin as the land. Just top decked a Restless Anchorage. And then Wandering Emperor, Memory Deluge. Otherwise, just a perfectly functional, powerful hand.
Yeah, and I really like this play by Chris, recognizing that Kyle probably has a counterspell, opting to play on Kyle's end step. And now if Kyle wants to counter this Resolute, which he does, Chris has the option of playing whatever he wants on his own turn.
Yeah, and Kyle has to know that, well, Chris's hand contains all spells,
Exactly.
because there was a missed land drop. So there is another land off the top. Warden, Resolute Reinforcements, and an Ibidane's Recruiter. Lots of options here, BBD, but I think this gets to the point where you're just like, how far do you extend into the possible wrath from
Yeah.
Kyle?
This is a really interesting line here. I kind of like playing the Recruiter. I love this play actually. Get as much damage in as you can. Kyle still has to answer this board. And now, if there is an answer, it's much less impactful than, yes, you could like build an even bigger board, but deal no damage. But the downside of that is if you just get swept away, you've accomplished nothing. Kyle at 3 life, that's always going to be a threat of a haste creature or something else like that coming in and ending the game.
Wow. And there we go. Taken down. Chris Barone wins the first game in extremely fast fashion. And one thing about Chris Barone, you might remember him from way back in the day, SCG Invitational, took down the second to last one and had a food token with his pup on it. You can Google that one. It's adorable, I must say. So no stranger to the feature match area, as those tournaments are really difficult as well, being 2 formats, BBD.
Yeah, absolutely. And notable that Chris kept, on a mulligan of 6, kept a very aggressive hand with only 1 land.
Yeah.
Which you might think like, that's crazy. How can you keep that? But sometimes you have to take risks like that. Like, is Chris going to be in a position to easily win a game on a mulligan to 5? Probably not, especially against a matchup like this. So Chris kept a very greedy hand, got paid off for it, and navigated the game extremely well. So that was a really impressive win.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, just because there are some matchups where you're just trying to be hyper aggressive. If you mull to 5, you want to kind of power mulligan to a good 5-card hand and you can kind of overrun your opponent. That's not really what this matchup's all about. There's so many sweepers. There's a lot of disruption from Kyle. So keeping a hand that just has more resources but is a little risky, I tend to like that a little bit more than power mulliganing that one to 5.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So players are just kind of looking over each other's sideboard. And while we do that, let's take a look at Kyle Moran's list as well. We did just see it not too long ago, but we'll get that up on the screen and see what cards do you like against Boros Convoke.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very similar to the last time, where temporary lockdown is the most important card. Having access to that card lets you play in a certain way, and it lets you come back from really devastating board situations. Mm-hmm. So that is really the key card. And then we've seen some of these other cards be really nice. The 4th copy of March of Otherworldly Light's been very impactful. Dust Animus was very impactful as well, both as just a 2/3 flyer on the second turn of the game. Sometimes that's all you need to just slow things down long enough to get to something like a Sunfall.
Yeah, I mean, that is the first time I've ever seen that card cast for 2 mana, for what it's worth, including limited. And I played a lot of OTJ, so I'll leave that up to your expertise that a lot of people pay turn to Dust Animus the old natural way. But it looks like Kyle Moran agrees with you, and Kyle's in the top 4 of this RC, so maybe we'll trust the expertise of you and Kyle's.
The scoreboard's in my favor on this one.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say it's a typical play. I wouldn't say it's the play that you want to make, but it is an available play, and there are times where that is the right play.
It is one of the plays of all time, that's for sure. So
it is a play that you can make, yes.
Let's jump on down to the game and see game number 2 here between these 2 players and see if Kyle can do exactly what he just did in the last match, and that was come back from losing game number 1 and winning the last 2.
I do believe that Kyle actually won game 1 last time, but...
Oh, yeah, you're right. Kyle was up a game. Okay, touche.
But let's, we could rewrite history however we want. We're the ones who have the microphone. We could say whatever,
Touche, BBD, touche. So we'll jump back down to the match. Looks like players are ready to go here. Is Chris's list like any bit different from the last Boros Convoke list that we saw, or are games going to play out pretty similarly?
I think it's going to be fairly similarly. I mean, there are differences here and there. Like no list is exactly the same, but I think in general, it's going to be a fairly similar dynamic.
So it looks like starting with Kyle, the hand is, I want to say 4 lands, a No More Lies. We have a Tidebinder and a March, perfectly reasonable. Didn't get a look at Chris's hand, but we'll take a look as Chris looks through the plays here. No mulligans, though.
Yeah, this is another scenario where Kyle doesn't have the sweeper, but has a perfectly good enough hand that you keep it anyway.
Yep.
The No More Lies in particular, as long as Chris doesn't have Cavern of Souls, like it's just a really strong card in this matchup just to get things slowed down. Like you just don't want Chris to be able to flood the board so easily.
Oh, turn 2/3 flyer. Okay, it's plotted this time. I thought Kyle was going for it once again.
See, now this time I prefer plotting it.
I don't know. This time I think I prefer saying go and holding up No More Lies.
Same. I prefer saying go and holding up No More Lies, but if I was going to make a play, if I'm making a play with this Dust Animus, I prefer plotting because this Warden is going to grow out of range of it so easily.
Yeah.
And so it's much less impactful in this kind of a scenario.
Ryan, I think Chris kept another one-lander. Oh, no. Okay. It was a pass, though, so that is doing its best Boros Guildgate impression for this turn.
Yep. Yeah, so now I think this is a decent spot for Kyle. Like, things aren't too unmanageable here. Chris didn't go off so crazy in the first 2 turns that you feel like you're under a lot of pressure. And you have a chance to just play a reactive, interactive game. And
wow. Yeah. Totally agree. So looking at Chris's hand, I see Plains, so land 3, double Invasion of Gobakhan, double War Leader's Call, Imogene's Recruiter as well. So lots of options here. Beauty, what do you like?
I like exactly the play that Chris made because you want to spend all your mana this turn because next turn you can play the double Invasion and that is going to... one of those is going to stick, and you're going to have enough power in play to immediately knock it down as well. So I like this line where
with a land at least, we still need a land
As long as Chris has the 4th land, I think this play makes a lot of sense. Just maximizing your mana doesn't always matter in a game of Magic, but in this particular scenario, I think it's impactful.
Okay, and here was the big decision to attack for 3 or to do another scry to set up the draw. Looks like we're thinking on that top card, decides to keep it and sends it back Kyle's way.
Now, one interesting play that Kyle could make here, which I don't think is a necessarily intuitive play, is a slam. Oh, that's a March of Otherworldly Light. I thought it was the Wandering Emperor. So say you could slam Wandering Emperor and just eat the Warden right now, and that insulates you against a lot of these lines. But I don't think that is what was in hand.
So it looks like the card that was left on top was a Gleeful Demolition, not able to double Invasion of Gobakhan right now, but is able to still double spell, play an Invasion if you want to be able to see if there's any trickery, any Sunfall maybe, something like that, and then play the Gleeful Demolition. But as it stands, you can play this Invasion of Gobakhan, and I believe I saw Tishana's Tidebinder, and I think you can copy that ability, or you can counter that ability.
Yeah.
And I want to know, I think there's a really, really interesting dynamic if you counter that a battle. I don't even want to say exactly what happens because it's a very strange interaction, but I want to say maybe the counters get removed and it immediately goes to the graveyard. There's some really non-intuitive thing that happens if it gets countered.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what it is. I know that if all 3 counters are... I think if all 3 counters are removed from it through combat, you can counter the trigger to transform it, and then it is gone. I don't know what happens if you counter the initial trigger.
I know. We'll let Twitch chat let us know on that. I'm glad Kyle didn't go for it, so we didn't have to be right about that one. Because I remember seeing this at a tournament here not too long ago, and it was a very strange, long judge call. And I think, to be fair, Tishana's Tidebinder is responsible for probably 90% of the judge calls at this U.S. Regional Championship.
Yeah, it's important that it keeps its legacy intact.
Yeah, absolutely. So Invasion just resolves here. What do you make? Cost a little bit more mana here.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the March of Otherworldly Light looks appealing. The Tidebinder. I mean, yeah, I think either of those cards look appealing.
Yeah, because if you hit the March, then you just pay 4, you deal with the Warden, and you're not attacking Invasion of Gobakhan anyways. So I think no matter what, the Gobakhan was not going to be dealt damage and flipped.
No, I don't think that is going to happen here. I can't make out. Is that 2 March of Otherworldly Lights? What is that other? I know one of them is a
I think it's a
March.
land. I'm actually not 100% sure. Is that? It looks like a land. Which one I am unsure of. Definitely a promo card. We can have chat help us out on that. Regardless, 1 March is going to be available to deal with this Warden. I think that's basically step 1.
Right.
And we'll see. Is there even an attack at all here from Chris?
Looks like is Chris casting Gleeful Demolition? That might be what's happening right now. I see a 3rd mana's tapped, and we might see March of Otherworldly Light to counter the Gleeful Demolition.
Yeah, just on the token, huh? Okay, it is a Gonjo, I'm getting word. Okay. So that's excellent. Now Kyle does have a really cool line available. You can march the token so that no, goblins are coming into play. And then you can just a Gonjo whatever tacker, obviously the Warden is the most impactful attacker here. So you probably don't want to send that one in. So Kyle does kind of have everything on lockdown for this turn at least.
Right, and Chris could just send with the Voldaren Epicure and say, do you want to destroy this? Or not even attack at all and say, like, I'll wait until there's a better scenario.
And I mean, the one thing that's coming down next turn is old Dust Animus here to be able to make that into a 4/5, and Chris Barone has 0 answers available to it. The one thing I don't think Chris is going to do is get that Warden into combat right now. You don't want Kyle to use his mana this turn if you can help it. And you don't want to give away your Warden because there is a chance that Warden can just outclass the Dusk Animus.
Absolutely, yeah. There's going to become a point in time where the Warden can grow large enough to do so. And I think Chris is saying, I want to get this Warden up big enough to where it also doesn't die from the 4 damage from Iganjo as well.
Yep, and I want to say that was a Get Lost off the top. So Get Lost and a Gonjo in hand for Kyle. Let's see.
Get Lost is a really nice draw against that Dust Animus.
Yeah.
Now, Kyle can play the Tishana.
Well, no, Get Lost was drawn from Kyle.
Oh, it was drawn from Kyle.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Also a very nice draw from Kyle. Just a very nice card in general.
Okay, so this is a way to pump up the Warden. Now, the Warden, if this was a 5/6 or something like that, you could run into the difficult problem of attacking into it, get lost on the Ward Leader's call, and then block, gain some life. It's not quite large enough, so Chris is just kind of has a very not so great turn here of just really setting up with the Ward Leader's call.
Yeah, Chris is locked into playing a little bit of a slower game where you're hoping that you can just put stuff out there turn after turn, and maybe Kyle just doesn't draw anything, and you do have some time against, like, the Dust Animus isn't that fast of a clock, and the amount of life gained is very relevant, but it's not like the Boros Convoke deck can deal such huge chunks of damage that it's not like as relevant as it would be against like a mono red style deck.
So that's what I'm wondering now, BBD, is can you even attack with this Dusk Animus? Like, obviously we're seeing Kyle get in there.
The answer is yes. He can.
But now, aren't you a little afraid of this Gobakhan flipping, or is the Tishana's Tidebinder just enough insulation from it?
I think it's enough insulation from it. And you also still have that access to the Iganjo as well.
Yeah. Yep, that's fair. So Chris is going to have that in mind. Just 1 card in hand. So perfect information for Chris. So we'll see how he uses that. Wow. Interesting. So goes for this. That's going to turn the Warden off.
Yep.
But
is notably still just a creature, it still like has power and toughness.
Yeah, it doesn't have the ability to put another counter on, and I think that's what Chris is trying to do, but not allowed. Yeah, does not have the ability, so...
What Chris could do here, though, is actually explore onto it, and then it's larger than the Tidebinder, and then attack the battle with it.
Well, the map is tapped, right? Is that maps?
Oh yeah, the map's got taps. Yeah, so never mind. That does not work.
No abilities. And I mean, that just shows like how tough of a card Tishana's Tidebinder is. Like, we're in the top 4 of this US regional championship, and there's still
Okay.
mistakes being made because of this. I don't necessarily love how this turn unfolded if I'm in Kyle's position. Like, I think being able to counter the ability of flipping the battle seems a little bit more impactful. What do you think, BBD?
I completely agree. However, that does lock you into just having to have all this mana open every single turn.
True. Chris
It
could
is
just say no, right? Could just not do that.
right. Chris is in control of when that battle flips, and so I don't hate the decision to say like I'm tired of holding up this much mana.
Yeah. As I mean, honestly, I think that is um one of the most impactful things of playing against Azorius control is making sure that you try to minimize their usage of their mana at every turn. Like
Right.
that is how it's worked against Azorius control historically. Wouldn't you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's like I want to make things as awkward for my opponent every turn. I want them to like the control deck always has like they're what they're hoping will happen, how they're hoping to spend their mana, and you want to make your plays such that they never get to play them in the ways that you're hoping.
Yep, exactly. And I mean, I think the players that do that, and that this is kind of a good reason why people get a little afraid to play control decks, especially Azorius control, and like Pro Tours, because you're like, well, all these players are professional Magic players. They're going to know exactly how to tax my mana. And, that's at least why I'm always afraid to play control at a Pro Tour.
Right. And there are times where control is just so good that you can do it anyway. Like
Yeah.
your opponent knowing how to tax you is one thing. Them having the ability to do it, like having the right cards and strategies to do it is another.
Do you think, as these players kind of figure out what they're doing, do you think Azorius control right now is at that spot where it's good enough to be played at a Pro Tour? I mean, obviously, we just saw the standard Pro Tour and we saw Yuta do very well with it, but is it that powerful of a deck in Azorius control history kind of thing?
Um, it's pretty good now compared to how it often is because I think control normally is like quite a bad deck.
Yeah.
So I would say right now it's pretty good, but I don't think it's like so good that it would not be a choice that I would personally make the way things are.
Yeah,
However,
it
there
doesn't
are
have
some
a Sphinx's Revelation kind of card, right?
exactly. It does not have that. With that
So
being
getting
said, there
Oh,
are
go
some
ahead, BBD.
players who are really good at playing control that it's right for them often.
Yeah, absolutely. So big attack here from the Imidane's Recruiter. Now that array is flipped, so taking a ton of damage, and now end step, you're going to get a counter on each creature, plus you have that ability to save your creatures from certain sweepers, but I guess not really any sweepers we're going to see. So Kyle really needs a temporary lockdown or a Sunfall basically right now.
Yeah, it needs to have access to something because even this Dust Animus is not doing enough. And that's kind of what we were saying. Like
No.
Kyle is at 27 life, has this 3-turn clock and a Dust Animus, but it's like the Boros deck can put out so much damage and scales up so much that oftentimes that's not enough. You still have to have the interaction.
Yeah, and there is Wandering Emperor as the draw. So now here's the question: can you attack? That it feels brutal with this Dusk Animus not having vigilance. Like that's the ideal thing that you would want here, but
I
what
don't
do you
think you
do?
can attack because
I don't think you can either.
that light shield array can sacrifice to prevent a minus ability from the Wandering Emperor.
Ah,
With that being said, there is maybe some line. Actually, maybe you can attack here,
okay.
and you would put Chris down to 8. You could make a samurai with the Wandering Emperor and block. But the other big thing though is this: now that this warden's actually back online.
Yeah, so it is a flying vigilance creature again, right?
Exactly. So the warden is back online. So that kind of makes a lot of these plays much harder because that's going to have vigilance now.
Okay, so that's basically saying no matter what, Kyle is going to take that life that he just gained and be hit back by the warden. And then you kind of count the other damage. Like I see, it's only 8 for the other creatures. you're able to put one blocker with the Wandering Emperor, and then you do have that ability to Aganjo as well. So, okay, Kyle's not sitting too bad. It'll really depend on what Chris's follow-up is here.
I think this game's really going to come down to whether Kyle draws an answer to this Warden over the next like 1 or 2 turns.
Yeah,
because that card is big enough to withstand the Iganjo, and has the vigilance to avoid the Wandering Emperor.
Yeah, right now the biggest, baddest creature is definitely from Chris's side. And, normally with Dusk Animus in play, it's not really the case, but Kyle does have plenty of answers in the deck to deal with a 1-drop. Let's see, Chris in the tank.
This is a really interesting spot, too, where we might see Kyle, if Chris does throw an attack out, we might see Kyle go with the Iganjo and say, like, okay, here, would you like to sacrifice this Light Shield Array? And then if Chris does, you can respond with the Wandering Emperor and exile a creature and gain 2 life.
Okay, so a little bit of timing. I wouldn't say restrictions, but just kind of putting your opponent to the test on if you want to do that or not. Decides to just boost up the Warden first.
It's going to bottom that card as well.
Okay. So now here comes everything. Let's see how Kyle decides to sequence this Aganjo plus Wandering Emperor.
Another option is also to activate the land as well, and it kind of performs a similar duty.
Okay. So is there any way to get the land going plus Aganjo and deal with the Warden?
I don't think so, because of the access.
One short, right?
And there's the access to the Light Shield Array too.
Yeah, I suppose.
So here we're probably just going to see a block on one of these 2/2s. I think Chris here should just say, like, okay, like, one of my creatures, you're going to take what looks to be 12 damage, and I'm going to grow all these creatures again at the end of turn.
Yeah, it looks like Kyle does have the option to put the anchorage in front of one of the 2 power creatures, and then either Aganjo or Wandering Emperor.
Yep.
And I mean, you could. Wandering Emperor is kind of bait at this point. You just say, okay. Yeah, I think Chris just says okay to both of these things, right? Like, I think the array is much more important. Putting counters on things, like, it really isn't that important to have the anti-wrath card, because all the wraths, either temporary lockdown or Sunfall, deal with the creatures through the array's sack ability, which isn't great.
Right. Yeah, and I like this too. I like just saying, okay, it happens. I would rather get the counters on my other creature. These counters that I'm getting now are going to make my creature larger than your anchorage next turn.
Take 10 down to 8. It looks like for Kyle. And now, I mean, Kyle still just has to get through that Warden. If Kyle can get through that Warden, I think we have a solid chance at a game number 3. If not, we might be seeing Chris Barone head to the World Championships here in a couple of turns.
Yeah, it's getting close to being. I mean, Kyle's running out of time. I mean, Chris is also at 8 life too, though. So if Kyle does draw an answer to the Warden,
yeah,
all of a sudden I feel like the game is kind of almost over the other way around.
Yeah, and Kyle's life should be at 8 if I did the math correctly. So we'll get that adjusted. And that was kind of a head nod, look to the sky. It's a Sunfall from the top ropes here. Wow. And yeah, that was either a look of disappointment or a look of, wow, I did it.
Yeah, I think that's wow, I did it.
Chris is like, well, I know what's coming now.
I'm going to gain 4 life and play Sunfall here.
Oof. What a gigantic draw to keep Kyle still in this tournament. Sunfall for 5 creatures, able to get a 5/5 incubate token, and this incubate token is not trivial. This is a 2-turn clock where Kyle now has to rebuild, and I know Kyle's hand is at least one of Invasion of Gobakhan, which is not very good right now. It's just a Warden, a Knight Errant of Eos, and an Invasion of Gobakhan. All of a sudden, Chris is looking really bad in this game.
Yeah, I think if Kyle draws an untapped land, well, I guess Chris is probably going to play this Invasion, so that will change the dynamic there. But outside of that, like, The token plus the anchorage plus a pump from the Wandering Emperor is 8 damage. So this is very close to being over.
Yeah, and I mean, the invasion of Gobakon only makes the Wandering Emperor cost a little bit more. It's still, you know, able to be cast here from Kyle. Kyle, it's up to 7 mana. But yeah, unable to animate plus get in there.
All right, was able to see the Wandering Emperor, take that. Can play the Warden, and I think you can actually activate it here. I don't think you're. I mean, I don't think you're at risk of taking actual lethal here. So maybe getting the scry is worth it. But
well, yeah, only one artifact and the creature, so you can't tap the invasion. So unable to get 3 things to tap for the Warden.
I think you could tap the map, the Warden itself, and the Light Shield Array. But either way, that also does run into the Wandering Emperor for 6 mana, exiling target tap creature.
Yeah, the Light Side Array is an enchantment on the other side. It's only creatures and art.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
My mistake.
Oh, all good. So decides now, do you want to get in for 7? There's almost no risk to doing so, but playing a Wandering Emperor might just be better. Kyle is 1 mana short of 2 mana short, I guess, of doing both. What do you like? I think you just want to play the Wandering Emperor, right?
I think so too. I think you send in for 5 and then just say go.
Sends in for 5, and I mean, normally with this aggressive deck, once Boros Convoke falls behind in pretty much any matchup, you're in a lot of trouble because the deck doesn't block very well. It doesn't come back from behind very well. All of its removal needs you to have a lot of creatures on the battlefield. So just not a thing that usually happens is this deck coming from behind, but especially when Azorius control is attacking, then it's extremely difficult.
Yep.
So decides to block and then sack the flip side of the invasion just to protect it. And there is a Sogenzen and a Knight Errant of Eos.
Yep. I think we'll see the Knight Errant here. That was a good play to block and sack the array.
Yep.
Staying at 8 life is important.
And that was a brick from Knight Errant. Chris is like, wow, this game turned around very quickly after that Sunfall.
Yeah, that was a huge draw, and it was kind of draw something that turn or bust.
It was. I mean, there was a decent amount of draws, right? Like, so of course that was an amazing draw from Kyle, but could have drawn one of the 3 Sunfalls, one of the 4 temporary lockdowns. March would have even been good. Like, you know, a solid 25% of Kyle's deck was a great out. He just happened to draw the best one. Here's Wandering Emperor for that extra tax to come down and deciding right now if you want to exile the Warden or just make a 2/2. I think I'd probably just make a 2/2 here.
I actually like exiling the Warden, to be honest.
And number 3, what we didn't expect at all. I actually really like this because now you attack with the 6/6 and the anchorage, and you force a chump block with the Knight Errant of Eos. Actually, Kyle just made, I think, the best play out of all of them.
Yeah, and I like that with the minus as well. That was my plan. It's like I'll minus on the Warden, and then now on my turn I'll plus on.
Oh, this. Sure, Brian. Way to cover your tracks there.
I gotta cover all bases, you know. But yeah, this is a great play. I mean, it forces the block, and you can actually make the same play either way. Like Kyle can actually still minus on the Warden here.
Yeah, absolutely.
All roads are leading to the same place.
Either way, it was a nice play by Kyle.
It was.
No option here. Chris Barone has to get that 4/4 in front of the 6/6. Now I think I like exiling. Like, just get all pieces of cardboard off the battlefield that you can right now and be on your way. So then, I mean, like, what do you lose to? You know, there's 1 card in hand. You got to assume it's Imitate's Recruiter. That's the card you're always trying to play around. But, like, I guess Gleeful Demolition, top decking that, and then Recruiter. How much damage is that? That's the number that I would have in my head that I have to protect against.
Yeah, and I think Kyle at 14 life is insulated from all of those things. It's going to have to be over multiple turns scenario for Chris to come back, and there's not a lot that can be drawn to do that.
Yeah, Soken Zen to be another chump blocker to stay alive for a little bit, as the Restless Anchorage ×2 plus a counter on that is only 5 damage, so we'll be able to live Lockdown plus Memory Deluge just because. And we'll see if Kyle wants to just animate both lands, cast spells in hand. All roads lead to a game number 3.
Yeah, and if Kyle like sniffs out that there's a Soken Zen, he could even consider going with the Deluge and then trying to hit a Tidebinder, and then that 6 damage would be enough. I mean, that's a really deep line, but it is one possible play.
That's true. I like at least animating 1 because then you present lethal in the air the next time. And here's the Soken Zen. Putting in a couple blockers, 1 in front, 1 gets to stay for Chris. And
yeah, I think this line of play makes the most sense. I think this is a great line of play.
Now I just really hope, and I think we will definitely see it. I've seen Chris Barone play, not for a while, you know, the Invitational. I want to say that was in what 2020, 2019, right before the pandemic kind of thing. But he played masterfully to win the Invitational that I saw him take down. So I just really want to see Chris, you know, not get frazzled that Kyle, you know, top decked on him to extend this to game number 3. And I think that's what separates, you know, the good players from the great ones, the ones that have short-term memory and don't remember this game at all when they start the 3rd one.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think both players have navigated this match really well so far, because there are not like super easy decisions. Like we were, you know, discussing what to do with the Wandering Emperor. We both had different ideas, and Kyle had a 3rd idea. So there's so many different ways to play these situations with these decks. And I think both players have played really well with the information that they've had. We have access to all the information.
Yeah, I think Kyle's just really been 3 steps ahead basically this entire time for the games that we've watched.
Yeah, I think he's trying to march to the otherworldly light that is the World Championship.
Wow, you really went there, BBD. Impressive stuff. So looking at this sideboard here, what do you like for game 3? Any real changes from Azorius controller, or is whatever you're bringing in when you're on the draw is going to be the same as on the play?
I think it's mostly going to be the same. This is a pretty it's a pretty linear matchup where both sides are trying to do one specific thing, and so you kind of know which are the good cards, which are not the good cards, and it doesn't change a whole lot from play or draw.
All right, everyone, 1 game for the chance at being a champion here at the U.S. Regional Championship. That's, of course, gigantic. Of course, $15,000 for 2nd place for the winner of this will be guaranteed. But the equity that you get from going to the World Championship, you know, you automatically get cash for just playing in that tournament. And the fact of just sitting down and saying, you know what, I'm going to go play in the most prestigious Magic tournament in the year, the World Championship. There's nothing like it. So let's get ready. One of these players is going to stamp their ticket right after this game.
Yeah, there's a lot on the line on 1 game of Magic.
So looking at Chris's hands, I don't see a 1-drop. I see 4 lands, Invasion of Gobakhan, Resolute Reinforcements. But yeah, no turn 1 play. I think it's still a reasonable keep, though.
I think so, too.
Yeah. Like, it's not ideal, but what are you looking for your 6? I mean, of course, you can be looking for Novice Inspector, Gleeful Demolition, Knight of Aaron of Eos, but
they can't all be that hand.
Exactly. You could run into some train wreck scenarios here. And Invasion of Gobakhan is going to reveal what I thought I saw, a 2-lander here from Kyle, but plenty of gas to choose from. This hand, I like to say, is kind of, you know, quote unquote Thoughtseize proof. You have the 2 counter spells with No More Lies that you're going to have up no matter what. So Kyle's going to have a good turn 2 no matter what.
Well, notably, though, Chris Barone does have Cavern of Souls.
Okay.
So these counter spells are looking a lot worse. I think you may be looking at, I'm going to take that temporary lockdown. So I'm not getting blown out with that. And then I'm going to make these counter spells dead by just playing uncounterable creatures when I can.
Yeah.
And in situations where Kyle's forced to play other cards or tap out in some way, that's when you're going to try to stick cards that would normally get countered by these 3 pieces of counter magic.
Yeah, and Azorius Control is a much scarier deck when the information is face down, but when you know what you have to play around, you can just dance around your opponent. But it looks like the Get Lost is taken. There's another cavern as well to be able to prevent any kind of shenanigans. Now, that being said, it looks like Kyle did pick up another land here.
Yeah, and it looked like it was crucially another white source as well.
Yeah, and I mean, the card was not taken. Just a recruiter here. Flipping the Gobakon right away. Oh, spicy.
That is a spicy. I like that. That's a nice play. And notably, too, that this recruiter, its converted mana cost is greater than 2.
Well, carry the 3 to it. Yeah, you're right.
that's elite level math right now. They say
wow.
don't do math on streams. I just did some math.
We'll all congratulate you in the chat, BBD.
Yes. So I really like this play because Chris let Kyle keep the temporary lockdown and decided, look, like I'm just going to play a game where that lockdown doesn't beat me that bad.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that's nice. That's well played.
Yeah, that is really interesting. So now, I mean, Chris knows about all this information, so is probably not going to just jam, another invasion of Gobakon here into a No More Lies. I'm not 100% sure if that Tishana's Tidebinder was face-up information. There's one card that isn't. It was, okay.
And we could see this Tidebinder come down as 3/2 flash.
Yeah.
And attempt to trade with the recruiter.
And the thing is, the recruiter is not getting boosted up if it doesn't attack. So, like, it's either going to stay this 3/3 forever, or eventually you have to get it in there. So, I mean, I would love to see from Kyle is cast that if there isn't
that's
wasn't something play. Countered, but I like this too, actually.
It's like, hey, here's something you can counter. If you want to counter this, okay, I get to attack. And if you don't counter it, then I get to take your Tishana's Tidebinder and I still get to attack.
Yeah, I think this is bait. I think Kyle should not counter this. The second invasion of Gobakon looks a lot worse, but I guess if you let it resolve, then you just take the Tishana's Tidebinder. I mean,
absolutely. There's no win here. I think you probably do have to counter it.
What if you just Tishana's Tidebinder the invasion trigger?
Oh, that is also an option, yeah.
I love that, because then it's countered, and here is that weird interaction of how exactly it works. I guess it still comes in with the counters. This is where I would 100% ask a judge if I was playing. I'd be like, I don't know how my cards work, judge, because that's a very tricky interaction.
And now I think this is a spot where you probably attack, and you're going to have to, if there's a block, which there probably will be, you're going to have to sack. You have to sack the other one. I think you have to attack here. You don't gain anything by sitting back.
Yeah, but I mean, you get this creature gets out of hand if you don't block, right? Because I think it's attacking the invasion of Gobakon.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden your Imidane's recruiter is going to be a 5/5. I think you are priced into the block, but looks like invasion array or light shield array gets sacrificed to protect it. Wow, interesting turn.
Yeah, that was a really interesting turn, and I think that both players made the correct plays with what they had available to them. Like, I think that was a really, really well played turn from both sides. There's perfect information involved with both players. All the information's face up. I really liked how that was navigated.
Totally agree. I think that was very well played by both. One thing that we got to point out here from Kyle is, yeah, he's drawn some lands to get out of it, but those wastes are very painful. I mean, if you're taking 6 damage from your lands over the course of a turn, that's like 1 extra attack step half the time here. I would definitely put the advantage for Chris so far.
One thing to note, though, is Field of Ruin can hit that Cavernous Souls and turn your No More Lies back online.
Okay.
It's not, you don't love that because, I mean, Chris is getting to the point now where he can just pay 3 extra mana in some scenarios, but
Be interesting. Now there's all those options in hand for Kyle. That Get Lost is now available as well for the full 4 mana.
Yep. And there's another card in there that I can't tell if that's a March of Otherworldly Light or something of that nature.
Probably is. There's so many versions of of March.
It's definitely an otherworldly version of the card.
Definitely, yep. That version is out of this world.
But it's not of this world.
All right, so Chris in the tank. We still know there's a Soken's in. Wow, Soken's in, if you can flip that array, can become quite the aggressive clock. And it's just another uncounterable threat that I wouldn't be surprised if Chris just says, all right, I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to channel that at end step.
Yeah, and there's also a line here of channeling it right now and sending everything, and that way you're likely to get rid of that battle even through a Wandering Emperor.
Yeah.
But that is a pretty all-in line.
Yeah, and then I believe, wasn't there still a lockdown in hand, and doesn't that get kind of wrecked by that?
Yeah.
Decides to Get Lost the Recruiter, as that's the only thing on the battlefield right now that can't get lockdowned. So, I mean, that is nice. That feels like, to me, what Kyle has been setting up this whole game, trying to remove every permanent that has mana value 3 or more, so that at some point, maybe he can draw land 5 and lock down with a counterspell available. Counterspell available is less important with all these caverns, but still.
And I like this play here a lot from Chris of, like, I don't want to, if I don't do anything with these maps, I'm getting temporary lockdown.
Yeah.
Let me try to get the value I can. While Kyle has done an excellent job of answering what Chris is doing, he's not really building towards anything. Like, I don't see any. I think he doesn't have any lands in his hand. He doesn't have any kind of source of card advantage. So he is just kind of stuck playing this reactive game for a while.
I mean, Kyle's been playing a reactive game for the last 15 rounds, you know? I mean,
yeah.
Azorius control really isn't about the having a plan things. It's a having a plan of to not die, and I'll deal with the whole winning thing later. But one of the best draws here from Kyle, just plains.
Yeah, basic land plans, great draw.
So now, I mean, another thing that we might just see is that 3 steps ahead, just discarding some of these No More Lies. I mean, it's just... that card looked not great.
Yeah, and that's one thing. Yeah, I completely agree there. Where it's like Kyle is fine playing a reactive game, but like these No More Lies are running out of juice. There's a lot of kind of weak cards in Kyle's hand. This is a nice line.
Absolute spicy play here from Kyle. This is so nice. Being able to Field of Ruin the land right now, and just say, okay, if you want to have an uncounterable Resolute Reinforcement, you have to do it now. And if Chris did go for an uncounterable Resolute, then you could just lock down. But gets the island, so there's going to be no locking down right now. But Kyle will have the ability now to No More Lies the reinforcement if you cast it at end step.
Yep.
Kyle has played really well.
Yeah. Yeah, this has been a very tricky game to navigate from the Azorius control side, having a lot of counterspells, those counterspells not being very impactful, and being under a lot of threat from these like invasions, and has navigated it very well.
So lets this resolve, and now it's going to come down to Kyle's definitely just trying to lock down next turn for sure.
Yep.
But is Kyle going to be okay with Invasion of Gobakhan being dealt with? And can Chris get a permanent in play that lives through the lockdown? And I'm kind of thinking, no. I mean, Kyle has just been kind of slowly picking apart Chris, putting him into a position where the lockdown is going to deal with everything, pass to Chris, and then he's left to rebuild. So I think Kyle has played this game phenomenally.
Yeah, and notably, like hitting another land and maybe actually getting to loot here with this. Okay, here comes the attack, I guess.
Okay, and it is at Kyle's phase. Oh no, it is at the invasion. So Kyle takes 1. The invasion flips.
Yep.
And now Chris is definitely not going to main phase overextend into a lockdown unless he has a good plan. And I think
Right.
he is just content. This is a big enough battlefield, which I would tend to agree. And then we're going to see probably all of this dealt with BBD from this very timely temporary lockdown.
I think so. And then we'll probably see that Sokenzen get channeled end of turn, and Chris will attempt to rebuild.
Yep. And I see a War Leader's Call, a Vidarian Epicure, and a mystery card in hand for Chris. And bad news for Chris Barone fans is following up with that War Leader's Call is going to be met with No More Lies.
Notably, though, Chris does know a lot of the contents of Kyle's hand. Like, Chris saw Kyle's hand, and a lot of those cards that Chris saw haven't been played yet.
Yeah, you know about it, but at this point, like, Chris was dancing around those counter spells early, but now he's coming to the harsh reality of, oh, I don't have a Cavern on human anymore, and I have to start playing through them, which is not the way that I think he wins. But that being said, I don't think there's a clear answer for these tokens right now, and of course, that's a very long clock, but it's something.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to touch on before, is like, Kyle's not doing anything that forces Chris to play quickly.
Yeah.
Like, maybe that will change at some point if Kyle, finds Wandering Emperor, finds a Dust Animus or something like that. But Kyle's doesn't have something like a Deluge to start generating a lot of card advantage.
Yeah.
So it's not really pushing the issue for Chris to have to play very fast. Chris can just get in for 2 damage here and there, maybe slowly rebuild his board and try to play around some of these pieces of counter spells.
Yeah, and Chris's hand is good. See, Imidane's Recruiter, War Leader's Call, Voldaren Epicure, and a Resolute Reinforcement. So, I mean, there is definitely play to Chris's hand, and I'm going to be very interested to see how he chooses to play. The one thing he can't do, War Leader's Call here. Can't do that. That
No,
will
you
get
don't.
no more lies,
Yep.
and that'll be bad news bears.
I think you can make this play for sure. And then another play I think you can make is the end of turn Resolute and use it as a bait spell, depending on what Kyle does.
Yep. I think the goal for Chris now is to get to a spot where he can resolve that War Leader's Call pretty much at all costs. But I think it's going to be very tough to do because, well, Kyle hasn't drawn anything that gives him the option to play anything. He just has all 2-mana reactive spells, and we're going to see him counter everything at this point because, well, he's got too many extra counter spells to go. So now it's just going to be a question of, does he No More Lies this or get greedy and 3 steps ahead with the ability to discard some cards? Oh, he's going for it. He's going for it. Uh-oh.
I think that's a play that is hard to make, but it's a great play. Kyle recognizes that what he's doing is not going to win him the game. Like, it yes, he can interact with so much that's going on.
I don't know. I think that was too greedy.
Really?
Yeah. Just because the resolved War Leader's Call is a way to pseudo give your creatures haste. Like, I think that's a very scary thing. And if anything, you should have left open a Plains to give yourself the option to be able to march something. Probably wouldn't have done it anyways.
Yeah.
But now next turn is 100% forced into Sunfall, and you're tapping out again. Chris wants Kyle to be tapping out so that Chris has the ability to always be the attacker. I think if Kyle just said go and No More Lies the reinforcements, then Chris's turn here looks a lot different. But who knows? I mean, it's close, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it definitely changes the context of the game a lot.
Yeah.
But I do think that Kyle can't afford to sit back forever either. Like,
agreed.
I think there is pressure on him to do more than just say, well, you can't cast anything either.
Yeah. So here is Sunfall with that 1 mana left to open for March. But we know there's a Recruiter. We know there's a Resolute Reinforcement. BBD, if we have land 5, we might be done here.
Yeah, there is still the access to the March of Otherworldly Light that can pitch some cards.
Yeah, and you can get the War Leader's Call, but two power creatures, that's 4, 5, 6, 7. If there's land 5, it doesn't matter if you have a March, it's lethal. But I guess the Resolute Reinforcement was cast. Never mind. Correction. But yeah, Voldaren Epicure plus an Imidane's Recruiter. And look at this position Kyle's in from tapping out that turn, is left to just do the only thing that kind of doesn't kill him here.
And that does kill him, actually.
And down
that
to
is 5 damage.
Chris Barone comes back in a very unlikely win after that huge Sunfall in game 2, is able to get his mind right and play one of the tightest games of Magic I have ever seen. And him just celebrating with his buddies. He just locked up a top 4 spot. He just locked up an invitation to the World Championship, and he's heading to the finals. I have chills right now from how masterfully that game was played. I think Kyle had that big decision with that 3 steps ahead. I think there's totally a merit to what he did, but it ended up being Chris Barone's key to victory. BBD, that was an incredible match.
Yeah, that was an incredible game, an incredible match. I love that. Both players had to play with so much pressure there. Yeah. They also had to play with like so much face-up information and so many possible lines that each player could make to navigate that. I thought both players played incredibly well.
Agreed.
Chris was able to find exactly lethal on that turn. That was beautiful played, and you saw the celebration. I mean, that's just a wonderful moment right there.
That is a wonderful moment. I mean, honestly, I truly live for those moments as a commentator. You know, when you win your match to make it into the top 8, your friends swarm you, you just accomplish something that, you know, you have the goal of. I think the goal would be top 8, or the goal would be making it to the Pro Tour at an event like this. But the true goal is second place. Everybody would lock in second place.
No one wants first place. No one cares about first place is not the goal. It's second place. That's where it's at.
Second place, you get the World Championship invite. You get everything else. You get the carrot on the string, as I like to say. You get to go and play in every event that this event allows. And huge congratulations to Chris Barone. But now, everyone, take a deep breath. We got another match to play here. We got another top 4 match that we're going to bring to you. I'm not sure. Are we going to take a break before this top 4 match? Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like we are going to take a very short break, but on the other side of this, Chris Barone needs an opponent. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back at the U.S. Regional Championship.